Okay, so flare. A little recap for skydiving and base. A lot has been said about flaring wingsuits over the last 10 years or so, and, I was thinking that we should do a little update. So what is a flare anyways? To flare your wingsuit, you trade altitude for airspeed, and you reduce your sink rate to near zero until you're actually going up. To do this, you increase your angle of attack, which will reduce your airspeed and, simply put, make you go down less. If you have enough speed going into the flare, then you will gain altitude, maybe hundreds of feet. The world record right now is 130 meters or 425 feet of altitude gain, and that record is in the Squirrel CR+, which is our competition wingsuit. Oftentimes, when people flare by increasing their AOA and slowing down a lot, they feel the g-force of deceleration and they feel their sink rate reduce, but most of the time in most suits they're not actually gaining altitude. If you want to know if you're really going up, then get a FlySight or a GPS unit and check your track log using FlySight Viewer or SkyDerby online. So when should we flare? Flaring is so much fun. I actually think that pulling G's to gain altitude in a wingsuit and then getting that zero G sensation as you tip over the top or the apex of your flare is one of the coolest things that you can do in a wingsuit. That said, it's never mandatory to flare, at least not in the skydive environment. If you've heard people say that you must flare in order to deploy your parachute, they are incorrect. It is not a required part of any wingsuit skydive, and sometimes it can even be a bad idea. Yes, it is important to control your airspeed at deployment, and much of the time this means slowing down a little, and that is achieved by doing the same thing approximately, which is increasing your angle of attack. So, on the subject of openings, for just a moment, I want to go into a little sidebar into deployment technique. And if any of this is totally new or strange to you, then please do yourself the favor of reading and watching more stuff on the Learn page of our website. The best practice for skydive deployments is to decelerate to an airspeed that works for your equipment. How fast or how slow will depend on what PC and main canopy you're jumping and how much force is necessary for the pilot chute to extract your main from your main container. You want to decelerate, then arch gently, chin up, reach to BOC with both arms, and pitch your pilot chute. Keeping your knees bent during the deployment process will help to prevent your leg wing from catching the relative wind. You don't want the relative wind to hit the back of your leg wing because it forces your legs up above you, and that is never a good thing for the opening. You want to control your leg wing and keep your legs and leg wing down throughout the deployment. Think about driving your heels into the relative wind and not allowing any wind to hit the back of your legs. So, back to the flare. The same technique that we use to flare is used to reduce our airspeed for deployment. But keep in mind that the deceleration for deployment is a gentle and controlled maneuver. Nothing aggressive or frantic is needed. If you're getting tense about slowing down enough for opening, or worried about doing it in the right way, then chill out. We're just gently detensioning the suit. Relax, as they say, and allowing ourselves to become a little more head high. Let the deceleration occur naturally over the period of a few seconds, maybe 5 seconds, and then slowly begin the deployment process. Flying straight ahead, gentle arch, knees bent, et voila, you've got a parachute. Okay, so when should we not flare? When not to flare is important to know, especially these days when so many people are armed with high flare power suits like the Freak series, and we're so amped up on flying fast formations together. We all know that after breakoff, the obvious fun thing to do is to dive down and accelerate away from your friends and then bust a big flare to slow down for deployment. It feels obvious because we have the urge to accelerate away from the group to make space for ourselves, and then we need to slow down to pull. And flaring is fun, so that's what we do. But this puts our friends in danger because we end up flying directly into their flight path blind. So we've got the formation, and we have their natural glide path, the speed and angle that they would continue to fly after breakoff if nothing changed. Then We've got little excited pants over here who wants to dive down to accelerate away from the formation, gain a bunch of airspeed, do a nice flare for deployment, and get their parachute open right here, exactly in front of where everybody else who doesn't dive and flare ends up if they continue as directed on a responsible speed and angle after breakoff. So that dive and flare in front of the formation puts everybody else in the formation at risk because they're behind you, we don't have eyes in the back of our heads, and we're flaring directly up into their flight path. And they might not be expecting you, nor be able to pick you out with all the background visual noise. All right, hopefully that was illustrative. This means that the person who didn't flare is suddenly exposed to their friend blasting straight up from below in front of them with no visual on the impending collision. Because none of us have eyes in the back of our heads, steep bank turns and flares are moments of increased risk when flying wingsuits. A responsible breakoff is to continue away from the formation at the same speed and glide with a mellow and predictable airspeed reduction. So let's talk base jumping for a moment, wingsuit base specifically, and why flare in base and how to. When wingsuit base jumping, we're using big pilot chutes and fast opening parachutes. So deceleration at deployment is important. Also, a nice flare can disconnect us further from terrain. If you're new to base, keep in mind that your parachute always needs to be configured to your deployment airspeed, not the object or your suit. What this means is that a slow airspeed at deployment, for example after a nice big flare at low altitude over terrain, will require a different PC, slider configuration, and pack job than a high airspeed deployment, for example pitching from a track or a wingsuit flight without a flare. It's about the airspeed, not the object. So what makes flare possible? Flare is a function of glide performance. The better your suit's lift to drag ratio, the more flare potential it has. In fact, there's even some discussion happening right now amongst a group of hardcore wingsuit performance nerds. They're talking about creating a nifty math equation. Right now, they don't all agree on what it should be exactly, but it might be as simple as, for example, 1.8 meters of flare height per 1 meter a second of speed, or as complicated as, there it is, the equation on screen. Carl, you got that, thanks. And they say it also seems to be a quadratic equation at some speeds, but linear at others. Don't ask me. Seriously, don't ask me. What they can agree on is that the faster you're going, the more flare potential you have. But flare height is tied directly to wingsuit glide performance. The math, which agrees with our experience flying smaller suits, says that you need a glide ratio greater than about 2:1 to be able to go up at all. We've always said that the best flare comes from level flight. What this means is that a gradual entry tends to be more effective than slamming on the brakes by going head high all of a sudden. As your airspeed decreases and you increase that angle of attack, you can increase it more and more aggressively to gain height. So there you go. Hit us up if you ever need a little flare. We're here to serve you.